TJ Otzelberger is so good at coaching that there's a real possibility he ends up getting taken away from Iowa State basketball. We're talking about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we are going to be talking about the possibility of TJ Otzelberger being plucked from Iowa State basketball's head coaching position. Then we're going to go into a little bit of spring training, some spring football practice, media availability from both the quarterback room and the cornerback room. Very exciting there. Finally, we're going to round things out with some Coastal Carolina. Yes, I did say that correctly. Concession stand talking. Could it fit for Iowa State? Can't wait to get into all that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now, let's talk a little bit about this TJ Otzelberger scenario, because I don't want to talk about it that much. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't even want to put this out into the universe, but I do think it's worth considering. Obviously, we talked earlier this year about TJ Otzelberger and his contract extension through 2032 and how excited I am for this and how exciting in general this should be for Iowa State Cyclone fans. I think we've seen enough, more than enough, to be completely honest, of what TJ Otzelberger has been able to do with this program to give him the extension that he deserves, to try to keep him in Ames. And we don't even need to dive into the actual things he's accomplished. Just know that we've been to more than one tournament. I think it's 4 now, a couple Sweet 16 appearances, and he took over a team that was 2-22. So like that right there, already enough. But then you look into it a little bit more and it makes even more and more sense. However, it's not a guarantee that TJ Otzelberger is going to be sticking around at Iowa State University. I hate to say it, but I do think it's worth mentioning. Now that this basketball season is over, we're seeing a lot of coaches moving around. I grabbed 2 guys off the top of my head here. Darian DeVries. Actually, I have an extra one. Darian DeVries is the first one. And we'll kind of stick at Drake for the first 2 here. Darian DeVries signed an 8-year extension in 2021 through the 2028-29 season at Drake. And then, granted, we haven't even gotten to 28-29 yet. Then he left Drake for West Virginia, where he signed a 5-year deal. And now he is on his way to Indiana. Okay, so both of those deals, neither of them are up yet. He's actually not even done with his Drake University contract and already on to his second school from Drake. Okay, worth noting. Ben McCollum, I believe, had 4 years left on his deal, now at the University of Iowa. And Kevin Willard, not from Drake, but also worth noting, going to be taking over the Villanova position from Maryland, where he came from. He had 4 years left on his contract, $4 million annually there that he would be receiving. And so all of that to say that I don't know how much argument this whole contract talk has anymore. I think we're looking at a situation where it's just about, can the university that wants the coach pay the buyout? And unfortunately, I don't have the number in front of me, but I want to say that TJ's number is pretty low, like around the $4 million range. And in the grand scheme of things for these universities, that's a number they're very much willing to pay for great success at their basketball institution, or I guess not institute, at their institution in the basketball program. And so it makes me a little bit nervous. I'm not going to lie. We've seen great success from TJ. And yes, we are also kind of seeing a pattern of flaming out in March, kind of towards the end of the season. But also last year, Big 12 tournament champions, worth noting. And this year, very injured. Okay. And so I think we can all agree, like, there is a reason that we're kind of having issues, or at least this year we had issues late. But nonetheless, maybe that helps Iowa State a little bit. But if let's say Iowa State makes it to the Final Four next year. Let's just say it. Who knows? Okay, let's just throw that into the atmosphere and toy around with it. Is there a chance that TJ gets plucked up and goes to, I don't even know who would be on the hot seat at this point, but let's just throw out like a Rutgers, right? A team that really needs a new head coach. And I'm not saying Rutgers does. I just picked a university But let's say that there is a team out there or a university that really needs a new men's basketball head coach, and they're willing to pay the big bucks, and they can pay the buyout, and they can put TJ on a new contract. Is that a possibility? It sounds like it is. It sounds like from a monetary and contractual standpoint, that is doable. We've seen it multiple times this year. The names I mentioned aren't the only coaches that were moving around, and I don't know what these contracts really mean anymore. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer or a contract negotiator or anything like that, so there's a reason I don't really know. But I thought that this, you sign him through 2032, you get him through 2032. I thought that was kind of what a contract meant, but I guess not. And so now it really comes down to, does TJ want to stay in Ames? I think that's the bigger question now. If TJ makes it to 4 straight Final Fours and every university in the nation is like, hey, making the call, TJ, you want to come over and play at UCLA? TJ, you want to come over and play at Oregon? TJ, you want to come over and play at Alabama? Or coach at all those places. Like that, those conversations can definitely be happening. And it's really going to come down to, does TJ want to leave or want to stay? I think that at the end of the day, that's literally the final question, which I don't love. I don't love that. And Iowa State giving him the big contract, and the extension and everything is good, but it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. It's not something you have the answer to right here, right now. I think if I were to ask that question right here, right now to TJ, he would say, of course I want to stick around. He loves Ames. It sounds like him and his family totally love the area, everything that is Ames. And I think that Iowa State basketball, the culture that is here, is second to none. I think that the show out from the fans is unbelievable. And I think that all of that helps. I think that could be a very big contributor, but there are things that can pull him away. With this whole new rev share deal going on, if Iowa State allocates, let's say, 15% of the rev share to men's basketball of whatever they make of that $20.5 million, let's say they don't get to the $20.5 million mark, they make $17 million available to these men's basketball, football, all of the all the teams. And then they're like, all right, of that, however much we make, let's say 17 million, basketball, you can have 15% of it. And then he gets an offer, all right, TJ, we're going to pay you this much. We'll buy you out, and we're going to give you 20% of our rev share. It's more money for him to work with, to build a team. Now, I do think that TJ is very proud of the culture he's built here in Ames, and everything that he has put into this program means something. Just from the vibes that I get from his conferences, from his, obviously mid-game interviews, post-game interviews, like college game day, like everything. It feels like TJ is very proud to be here. But I do wonder, not only with the contract money, like if you take the actual money being paid to TJ Otzelberger off the table, and now you also have leverage in how much money he's going to get to build a program, it's tough. That's a whole new wrinkle to this whole thing. If you're at Iowa State and you're getting 5% of the rev share, which I know is an astronomically low number, that's pretty much never going to happen, I would have to imagine. But if he's getting 5% here, and then he's offered 45% somewhere else, or like a Big East school could easily say, like Villanova and Kevin Willard, like, hey, we're going to give you 65% of our rev share. You get to use all that money to build your roster, build your program, and then therefore build your legacy. That is the important part. Yes, there is a lot of value in guys who stick around with one organization forever. I get it. That's a real thing. But at the end of the day, too, you're looking at, what did the coach accomplish? How many Sweet 16s? How many Elite Eights? How many regular season championships? How many tournament championships? All of those things are talked about when you talk about a coach. And in 3 years, is there a possibility that TJ isn't seeing what he wants for himself at Iowa State, and someone reaches out with more rev share money for him to be able to use and will pay you this much? Is that possible? Unfortunately, it looks like it might be. And I don't love that. But I do think, to round this out, that TJ Otzelberger is proud to be a Cyclone, is proud of the culture he's built here, and is very excited for things to come in the future. So I'm not worried at this point, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. You see all these guys moving all over the place, and it's like, could this happen to Iowa State? It seems like, from what I understand, it is possible. Now, speaking of guys moving around, we got to talk a little bit about the cornerback situation with guys moving to wide receiver, from wide receiver to corner, the corner quarterbacks, and who they're going to be throwing to. We're going to do that coming up right after this. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, like myself, squeezing in a round of golf after work now that it's getting brighter later, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. With longer days, I love getting outside for a hike or for some golf. Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Okay, we've been talking a little bit of what ifs scenario here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day with TJ Otzelberger. To me, it feels like he'll be sticking around in Ames for a good period of time, but I thought it was worth at least mentioning that apparently the contracts don't mean as much as I thought initially. Now it's time to pivot towards football. Couple media availabilities from Coach Jake Waters and Hank Poteet. I just looked it up prior to this. But either way, the quarterback and cornerbacks coach for Iowa State, and we can start with the quarterbacks here. Jake Waters talked about Rocco and what could possibly get better. What can Rocco get better at going from last year into next year? And the biggest thing that really they talked about was leadership, which I thought was surprising. But when you look at what this team lost in leaders last year, I think it's a valid argument. You look at, like, obviously Bo and DP and all, obviously both of the wide receivers and stuff. And something that they mentioned, Coach Jake Waters mentioned was, this is your team now. You got to kind of take control of this situation. Not to say he wasn't before. We've heard so much about how Rocco is an unbelievable leader, but also we do need to, like, kind of give him, like, you got to go here. You kind of got to make some hay, do a thing or two here. And I love it. I do love it. I think that if your quarterback is the main guy, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Podiat. That's what it is based on my research. That's the guy who's touching the ball literally every play, without wildcat or whatever the case might be. And so I do like that. I like that they're trying to instill that into Rocco. We saw a lot of late game, just amazing football from Rocco last year. So I'm not saying that he can't do it or that he hasn't been doing it. I think he has, but that is a great step for Rocco to kind of make the next step into that upper level. And there are a few other things that he has to talk about, or Jake Waters talked about, that he has to do, cleaning up situational football, getting through his reads. And that reads portion was something that was talked about a lot. Now with the absence of Jalen and Jaden, there is no security blanket. There is no, forget it. There's someone out, Jaden's out there. I'll throw it that way. If you know what I mean. And so he's got to, work through his progressions, hit his checkdowns, scramble, whatever case, whatever situation he finds himself in, find out what you need to do, like get through your progressions and then act immediately. Getting through 1, 2, what's backside doing? Okay. Nothing's out there. Where's check down? Nothing's out there. What are we doing in the pocket? What's our run lane looking like? What's the secondary doing, which he already probably knew beforehand? Are they in man? Are they in zone? Do I have a running lane? What's the situation looking like? Is it a throwaway? Like that kind of thing. It sounds like that's where they want Rocco to really kind of make the next step. And I think without a Jalen or Jaden situation at wide receiver, and maybe, who knows, maybe Xavier and Chase will be unbelievable wideouts, and I hope they will. But without that kind of same as what it was last year, maybe that forces him to do that and actually creates a better quarterback in Rocco. Coach Waters was also asked a little bit about some of the backups, and obviously Connor Moberly a name that came up quite a bit. He's still on a throwing program, so he's throwing the ball, but he's getting a ton of mental reps right now. He's learning the offense. He is just totally knee deep in the film room. As a redshirt freshman, a lot of possibility here. And it does, they kind of talked about like, he's a dude. Okay. And so that does feel nice to have him like, if anything were to go wrong, it's not like we're just trotting out the punter to play quarterback, take snaps and hand it off, kind of like the 49ers were a couple of years ago when Brock Purdy went down and they were effectively shut down against the Eagles because you become one-dimensional. With Connor Moberly out there, like we still got a guy. We're still okay. And so that's a very good situation to find themselves in. And they did talk about like, we're making an emphasis to get him as many reps as possible. Really need to get him as comfortable in this offense as possible right now with so much in the film room, mental reps, like you're learning the offense, obviously just seeing what the defense is doing out there. Those kinds of things are going to be big, but also getting him the actual reps and building up the rapport with the wide receivers, very important as well. And now we transition over to the cornerback, to the defensive side of the ball, and Hank Podiat. This is going to be a tough year potentially for the secondary with a couple of key losses, but Jontez Williams, a name that was thrown around a lot. Expectations are to be a great leader. Coach Podiat was like, hey, this is gotta see it here. And not that we haven't, but really gotta see it here. And I think that there will be some of that just across the entire secondary, but I do think Jontez is kind of that guy. Then asked about Trey Bell. Obviously, if you don't remember, transfer from Lindenwood. And he said, like, he was asked what really drew you guys to Mr. Bell. And he said it was his experience, his size, length, speed, his performance in big games. And that's all awesome. That's kind of stuff we talked about when we got the news he was transferring in. And I thought that this was a great addition. And so when you bring in guys from a smaller school to the Power 5 level, there's always going to be a question of like, is it going to translate? Were they great where they were and it'll transfer over and they'll be great at the Power 5 level, or were they great where they were because they were playing, Southwest Eastern Tech University? Is that the case? It's tough to know. And you assume everyone is the best they can possibly be, and maybe that they haven't even hit their ceiling, and you can really bring that out in them. And it sounds like that's the case with Trey Bell. Said the transition to Power 5 has been very good so far. So that's another promising kind of nod towards Bell of what could come this season from the Iowa State secondary. And then really capped it off by saying, Coach really capped it off by saying that his work ethic is similar to a Darian Porter. Is that good? I don't know. You tell me. And so then there was kind of just some conversation about the room as a whole. Room's really hungry. That's always a good thing to have, especially here in the spring when it feels like the games are so far away. But then they dove into a little bit on kind of guys transitioning from wide receiver to cornerback. TJ, DP, Benny Ngoye is the name this year that everyone's talking about. And I did like this answer from Coach Podiat, basically saying that it's a good thing because they have experience in that wide receiver room. They know how to attack a defense, the route trees, all of that. So they have an understanding when they're lining up on defense, what's coming their way. What is the offense trying to do? You can have all of the physical attributes of the best corner of all time, but if you don't really understand what the offense is trying to do to you on a deep level, you're just going to be at a slight disadvantage to someone who does. And so knowing like, okay, when the receiver's trying to go out here, he's attacking this hip, he's trying to get me to pivot here. We saw on film, this is what they do in this situation. This is his route tree from here. We saw this, maybe they have a tell. If they have a tell, that's awesome. Whatever the case might be, Benny really can rely on his wide receiver experience to know how to best react on defense and make a lot of plays. I think that this is something that Iowa State has kind of used to a very wonderful degree, I guess is how I would put it. Like this is something that we've seen success in the past. And so I am excited to see what Benny Ngoye can do. And obviously the transition from wide receiver makes it complete sense. It is really a solid one because the positions are so similar in nature, obviously face each other all the time. But with that knowledge, that understanding, I think that really can carry him quite far. As far as spring games goes, I don't know if we'll be playing a spring game, but I do know Iowa State will be playing some football games in the fall. And so we got to talk about if Iowa State could take a new approach to the concession stand this fall, coming up right after this. The NCAA tournament is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs in this Final Four, and FanDuel is making it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So Iowa State concessions. Been a topic of conversation, actually, quite a bit this offseason. We haven't really talked about it so much here on Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But some news broke on the last day of March, actually. Not April Fool's Day. No. The last day of March, this came out. And so I thought this was worth potentially exploring. Coastal Carolina, for those of you who do not know by now, will offer free concessions to all ticket buying I guess it's not customers, but fans, I suppose, in their games this fall. Every game, unlimited food. That's a wild. I don't even know how else to phrase that. Like that is insane. So the items that they can get for free: hot dog, nachos, popcorn, fountain drink, or water. Every time they visit the concession stand, they can visit as many times as they want. But they can only bring 4 back from each visit. So I guess there is a cap, but like you could just hop right back in line, go up, get 4 hot dogs, get in line, 4 hot dogs, get in line, turn into Joey Chestnut. I mean, it's entirely possible. And for just the price of 1 ticket, there are a few things that are worth mentioning here. First thing, Coastal Carolina does not make any revenue from their concession stand. So they have a deal with Aramark, I believe is how it's pronounced. They don't make any money off their concession stands. So this won't really affect them that much in that regard. I did look at their attendance because I was like, oh, they must not be getting a lot of people in. It looks like they are actually pretty much maxing out the attendance right now. From what I'm seeing right here, 21,415 on average. Their stadium holds 21,000. So unless I'm missing something, it seems like their stadium is full. But it's kind of like it looks like they're trying to build a culture there. So could this is this feasible for Iowa State? Could this happen in Ames? No. No, there's just no way. Multiple reasons. For one, Iowa State would lose quite a bit of revenue, more than likely. And as we talked about with the rev share thing going on, it just wouldn't, like, that would be a terrible loss. If you were to kind of generalize the math here, if every fan spent $10 coming in, with the capacity, you're looking at well over $500,000 a game. It's like $4 million for the season, roughly. Maybe even a little bit more. Just depends on the year, I suppose, how many home games you have. This is not really feasible to lose on that much, especially when you look at how much Iowa State brings in every year. That's it's going to directly impact that rev share number and the amount that is able to go back into the programs. But let's say, hypothetically, that it wouldn't affect the rev share number enough for it to concern Iowa State. Let's just say that Iowa State is making $500 trillion a year. And so if they lose out on a couple million, it's like, oh, no big deal. I think Iowa State could stand to benefit from a few extra fans in seats, because I had, just graduated, have noticed that there are games where there's sections of the upper bowl that are kind of empty, and especially late in games, it's really fun right away. Get that kickoff, everyone's super excited. But if it's a blowout either way, it's really tough to keep fans there the entire game, especially depending on the timing of the game. If it's getting late, if it's cold and rainy late in the season, cold and like snowy potentially late in the season, depends on the year. If it's really hot, if it's a noon game and it's like 90 degrees in August, like that's also, you got to factor that in. So free waters, is that something we could do to keep them in the hot games? Free hot dogs late in the season to keep people warm. I don't know if it's from that standpoint, if it's feasible, but I do think that there is the opportunity to try to keep Jack Trice as packed as possible throughout all games all year long. I don't think that that's a bad goal, because that trickles down to the recruitment level. Obviously, it directly affects the game with how loud it gets in Jack Trice, but also if it's loud and if it's just a rowdy environment, look at what that would do for recruits. They're what they see Jack Trice as when they come on their visits. Now, I also don't know how Jamie Pollard would feel about this. When he was asked about the whole alcohol sales, he cited like, hey, I don't think the concourse can take lines like that. That was his opinion. I'll leave it at that. But nonetheless, if you're going to do this, that's going to drive a lot of people into those lines. I don't know if Jamie would be or Mr. Pollard, I suppose, would be a big fan of that. But it's worth I feel like it's worth at least considering on some level. And maybe that's just because I am the fan in the seats and I don't have access to the numbers. But I mean, Coastal Carolina is going to find a way to make it work. They are in a very unique scenario. I understand that with the whole no revenue from it. It's going to be not that big a deal. And they were kind of going from the angle of, you got to sign up for this app. You got to give some information. Once you do that, if you buy a ticket, their team's going to reach back out, see if you want to buy another ticket. I don't think Iowa State struggles so much from that standpoint. But there are things that Iowa State could certainly work on in that department. The student section location is something that I think a lot of people talk about right away. Not really relevant to this, but it is on my mind immediately. A lot of students were more likely to go with the old section closer to the band and that whole thing, but then they moved it for whatever reason. And now you see the student section struggle at times. And then you look at maybe families. This is a big event, but then the kids get hungry in the third quarter. If you've got some food available, they stick around for longer in the game than them having to go. Maybe they go to Hickory Park or whatever, make an event out of it, as opposed to sticking through the entirety of the game. I don't think this, to make this clear, I don't think this is super feasible for Iowa State by any means. I do think that they would take a big hit that would directly result in probably a lower rev share number. Not great on that front. We talked just about how much importance goes into that rev share, how important that is for Iowa State, on top of maybe the infrastructure being a problem, according to Mr. Pollard, and things of that nature. But I do think it's worth considering when you look at, we don't have maxed out attendance at every single game. I mean, we just don't. And we have people leaving in the middle of games, and that's always going to happen when there's blowouts. But at the same time, maybe it keeps someone around for an extra 10 minutes. If you can go get a hot dog, back up into the stands, and enjoy at least one more Iowa State offensive drive. I think it would help with that recruitment if the stadium was more full, and I think it would certainly impact the game, whether it be in a comeback situation, then the players just feeling the juice when they score a touchdown, or in a close game, obviously getting as loud as possible when the opponents have the ball. Those are all important, and Cyclone Nation does a wonderful job of packing the jack every week. I just think that this would be what do you think? Wouldn't this be absolutely awesome? I think this would be really cool. That's just me, but I also really like hot dogs, so maybe that's a part of it. I don't know. Popcorn, no nachos. I mean, they got something for everybody, and the fountain drinks too. Really rounds out the whole combo there. Round out the combo. If you've made it to this far and you haven't hit subscribe, do that so we can prove it's a Cyclone State. Hit them with the old 1-2 on that subscribe button. Really appreciate that. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.